In 1943, Allied bomber formations flying over Reich-occupied Europe were sustaining high losses. The cause of these losses is usually attributed to either fighters, flak, or other. The other loss category may be due to mid-air collisions, takeoff or landing accidents, or weather-related incidents, all while on a combat mission. We shall review data which shows it's a little more complex than this, as most bomber losses were due to a combination of events. The intent of this video is to address the sequence of events that led to a typical bomber loss by piecing together bomber attrition archive data. This chart from a 1945 document titled Statistical Summary of 8th Air Force Operations outlines both fighter and bomber loss rates. The x-axis is a month and year from August 1942 to May 1945. The y-axis is a monthly loss rate percentage per credited sortie. Most of the study period data will be based on bomber losses in 1943. The losses include Category E, which are planes that landed back in the UK but were damaged beyond repair. This is an example of a Category E bomber, whereas this is an example of a bomber lost during the mission. Around 1% of bomber losses were classified as Category E, as discussed on this page from a February 1944 report titled Exhibit 21 Report on the Strategic Bombing of Europe. In order to ascertain the event or sequence of events that led to a bomber loss, eyewitness testimony would need to come from the shot-down bomber crews, since witnesses from other bombers in the formation may not be able to track the bomber to its final demise. Fortunately, 150 bomber crew members who were shot down over Reich-occupied territories and made it back to Great Britain could relay the exact circumstances of the events that led to their bomber loss. A repatriated airman is rare, as less than 1% made it back to Allied territories, as discussed on this page from a 1992 document titled Aviator in Combat, 8th Air Force and the RAF Bomber Command. This testimony will be free from incomplete reporting from formation crews who witnessed the loss. Of 100 bombers lost, 61 were stragglers, reattacked as a straggler, and finally shot down, and the remaining 39 of the 100 were shot down while in formation. A straggler is a bomber that has fallen out of formation, but it's either fully or partially flightworthy. This image from a 1945 8th Air Force Tactical Development document shows the bomber formations active during March to December 1943. The combat wing formations are spread 6 miles apart. Each combat wing is comprised of 54 bombers made up from a lead, high, and low group. The formations are arranged to provide mutual gunfire protection. If a bomber is knocked out of the combat wing, it will lose this mutual protection and become a straggler. The shaded part of this text indicates the cause of the bomber becoming a straggler graphed here. The bomber was knocked out of formation by ground anti-aircraft fire 38%, enemy aircraft formation attacks 26%, engine issues 21%, and other 15%. 61% of bombers lost were stragglers, and 38% of these were knocked out of formation by ground anti-aircraft fire. This page addresses where along the sortie route is the bomber most likely to be lost by Flak from a 1945 SINPAC Flak Intelligence Memorandum No. 9. The data was collected from 8th Air Force B-17s and B-24 missions during January through May 1944. Of the 600 bombers lost to Flak, 200 or one-third were lost while flying towards or away from the target, and 400 or two-thirds were lost while over the target. Flak losses and damage is much more significant while over the target. This section of the text describes the event that led to the bomber's final demise and is described in this chart. Of the stragglers that were forced to leave the formation but were airworthy to some degree, 85% were subsequently attacked and shot down by fighters, and 15% were shot down by Flak. Of the 39 bombers that were lost while in formation, 51% were shot down by fighters and 49% by Flak. Recognizing the vulnerability of a straggling bomber, the Germans would lob rockets into the formation from long distances in an attempt to break up the formations and pick off the stragglers with single-engine fighters. The lethal radius of German heavy flak projectiles is listed on this page from a July 1945 20th Air Force Air Intelligence Report. The lethal distance of the 88mm caliber projectile equates to 4 meters or 13 feet. A scaled 13-foot radius zone is shown in this image for reference. If the flak projectile detonates inside this 13-foot lethal radius, then the projectile's fragments and/or explosive force will likely destroy the bomber or incapacitate the flight crew. If the flak projectile detonates outside this 13-foot lethal radius, then the projectile's fragments may damage the bomber such that it can no longer remain in formation. However, the bomber is still airworthy, but likely flying at reduced performance. The B-17's formation indicated airspeed to and from the target equates to 155 miles per hour, as discussed in this table. Bombing altitude will be around 24,000 feet. The effective altitude of the German 88mm flak gun equates to around 27,000 feet, as shown in this chart. The flak guns used to shoot down the stragglers may be the smaller caliber size guns, depending on the straggler's altitude. A bomber's most vulnerable component is its unprotected engines, as discussed in this August 1944 Combat Loss and Damage 8th Air Force document. Over 50% of 8th Air Force bombers were stragglers, and the source of being knocked out of formation was usually the loss of one or more engines. Of bombers lost in combat, 75% had one or more engines knocked out. 61% of the 838 B-17 crew members who bailed out jumped due to fire or fire damage, as shown in this table from a March 1945 Army Air Force's Parachute Questionnaire document. We can piece together the sequence of events that led to a typical bomber loss. A bomber is traveling towards a target in Germany, flying in the 54 Bomber Combat Wing. The formation is at an altitude of 24,000 feet at an indicated airspeed of 155 miles per hour. The target's flak block battery is alerted. The formation is picked up and tracked by the site's small Würzburg radar. When the formation is visible, the gun director targets the formation and feeds a firing solution to the 88mm caliber heavy flak guns and open fire when the formation is within around a 6-mile range. Flak projectiles burst around the formation. A flak projectile bursts close enough to disable a bomber's number 3 engine. The damage renders the engine inoperative. The pilot shuts off the fuel to that engine and feathers the propeller. This is an example of a B-17's number 3 engine feathered propeller. The bomber is still airworthy but cannot keep up with the formation and becomes a straggler. The straggler comes under fighter attack, catches on fire, and the crew bails out. The plane is lost. Given the sequence of events, should credit for the loss be attributed to the final fighter attack or to the formation knockout by flak, or both? This table from a 1945 20th Air Force Command and Staff reference book lists the combat causes of B-29 losses. The columns are enemy aircraft and flak, or unknown. This table from a 1945 official Army Air Forces Statistical Digest document outlines 8th Air Force's aircraft losses during World War II. The categories include enemy aircraft, flak, and other. Although not discussed in the report, it is likely that if both flak and fighters contributed to the bomber loss, half credit would be shared between them. The channel has produced a 9-video flak playlist outlining how bomber formations adopted both active and passive flak countermeasures. The takeaway from this video is stay in formation at all costs. If you found this study data interesting and informative, please consider supporting the channel by commenting, liking, and/or subscribing to World War II U.S. Bombers.